I don't like this. Something's not right here. You alright, brother? Holy shit.
I hate fabricants, automatons, clockwork creatures, whatever you want to call them. Hate the brass, hate the clicking, love to see them in pieces.
Oh, hey guys. Now you come along. We could have used your help a few minutes ago. Oh well. I'm glad that you're here though, because today I'm making good on my promise that my next video would be a heavy attack build. Today I'm going to revisit my heavy attack no pet sorcerer. That's right, no pets. So if you're not a fan of the winged twilight, stick around. Heavy attack setups are billed as being easy to play, but I'm not sure that I agree entirely with that. They're easier but not easy to me. And, as always, I'm going to consider myself a good representation of the average player. Heavy attack builds work very differently from other builds, and that can make them a little difficult and counterintuitive. But, as always, I'm going to give you the complete build, including skills, gear, and the exact rotation. Okay, let's go ahead and look at the character sheet.
Is it always this crowded?
What? There's only one guy. Relax. On this character, I'm running a Dark Elf, and they get bonuses to Magicka, Stamina, Weapon and Spell Damage, and Fire Resistance. They're at the top of the tier list for both Magicka and Stamina, and I'll put the tier list for Magicka up on the screen. Dark Elves share that top spot with High Elf and Khajiit. Breton and Orc comprise the second tier, and the rest of the races vie for the bottom spot. But don't roll a new character if you already have one that you enjoy playing. Race just doesn't make that much of a difference. I'm running the Thief Mundus, which is the best choice unless you're going to do a build for a specific purpose like PvP or arenas where you might choose to run something different. My buff food is Mistral Banana Bunny Hash. This disgusting sounding recipe increases my Magicka and health. One of the advantages of heavy attack builds is because they don't have sustain issues, I can spec more into health and Magicka by running foods without a sustain component. Why no sustain issues? Well, if you're continuously heavy attacking with a staff, you'll never run out of Magicka. And I have a skill slotted which prevents me from running out of stamina. Up top, I've got all 64 points in Magicka. You heard that right, Magicka. One of the rare Magicka builds to appear on the channel. Max Magicka winds up at 34,000 points and health is at a comfortable 25,000 points. Spell damage is at 5,100 and crit is at 48%, and those are buffed values. Because this is an Oakensoul build, Major Sorcery and Major Prophecy are already in. Another buff that's already on the sheet is Major Resolve, which brings my resistances up to 17,000. Okay, let's move on from the character sheet. Let's take this guy down.
I guess we could do that. We make a good team. Anyone can see that.
Yeah, we do, partner, and that's because we have skills. Get it? The next section is skills? Never mind. Sorry. Let me start by saying that almost all the damage in a heavy attack build comes from, surprise, heavy attacks. Unlike 2-bar builds, you're rewarded here by using a minimal number of skills. And that works great here because this is a 1-bar build. I'm going to start off a fight by casting my healing skill Dark Exchange whether I need a heal or not. This Sorcerer skill exchanges Magicka for health and stamina and ensures that I'll never be low on either for long. But here I'm using it to pre-buff with Minor Prophecy. This is one buff that the Oakensoul Ring doesn't provide. Casting any skill from the Dark Magic skill line will give me Minor Prophecy, and once the fight is underway, I actually have another skill which will take over that job. You probably noticed that I used Crit Surge in that little fight I just showed you a piece of. and I try to choose a healing skill that fits the content I'm doing. For 4-player dungeons, I like Dark Exchange. For content where I have to face tank things and there's a lot of incoming damage, Crit Surge can be hard to beat. Alright, next I cast Elemental Susceptibility to reduce the armor of whatever I'm fighting by 5,000 points. This skill also inflicts the target with the 3 elemental status effects every 7 seconds. If I'm fighting trash, I won't use this skill, I'll just skip it. Next I use the Destruction Staff skill, Elemental Blockade. Most heavy attack builds will advise you to run Unstable Wall for extra damage, but I think this makes what should be an easy rotation a lot more difficult. Unstable Wall lasts only 10 seconds while Blockade lasts 15. If I use Unstable Wall, I'll be working myself almost as hard as if I was running a 2-bar build, and I think the extra damage is practically negligible compared to the damage my heavy attacks are doing. If I were you, I'd run Elemental Blockade, especially since the primary function of this skill isn't to do damage but to proc the off-balance condition on enemies. That's because off-balance enemies take 70% more damage from heavy attacks. The mechanic of this works as follows. I run a Precise Lightning Staff with a Shock Enchantment, and that Shock Enchantment will cause the enemy to become concussed. Then Wall of Elements will cause the concussed enemies to become off balance. There, now you know exactly how off balance works except for the duration. An enemy will be off balance for 7 seconds, after which it will be immune for 15 seconds. At this point you know almost everything you need to know about heavy attack builds, but let's talk about the rest of the skills anyway. Now that the fight is underway, my whole job is just to hold down that heavy attack button. Well, almost my whole job. There may be a few buttons I need to press. I use the skills here by queuing them up. If I want a skill to fire, I simply queue it up by hitting that button. When the current heavy attack finishes, and before the next one starts, the skill will fire off automatically. No need to time attacks here. The game handles the timing for me. The first skill I'll be queuing up is Crystal Weapon. This skill comes from the Dark Magic skill line and causes my next 2 heavy attacks to do additional damage. It also gives me Minor Prophecy. Anytime I don't have another skill I need to use, I'm going to use this. Except for when it's time to use the build's real spammable attack, and that's the next skill I'm going to queue up. Because I'm into my second heavy attack at this point, I can queue up Bound Armaments. Every heavy attack summons 2 spectral daggers to float over my character. When I have 4, I can use this high damage attack. Now you may be under the impression that the skill isn't ready. It won't be ready until my second heavy attack ends, then it will glow for a split second and fire automatically. I'm going to queue up Bound Armaments every other heavy attack. Other than that, I just have to queue up Blockade and Elemental Susceptibility when they need to be refreshed. And I'll use Crystal Weapon if nothing else is ready. If Bound Armaments is ready and it's a choice between that and something else, I use Bound Armaments. I use this every other heavy attack without fail. The other skills can wait for the next heavy attack. Okay, hopefully if you didn't know before this, now you do know something about off balance and how heavy attack rotations work. When in doubt, hold that button down. Heavy attacks are where almost all the damage is coming from. My last skill is my ultimate, the Charged Storm Atronach. This ultimate does shock damage in the area around it and applies the concussed status effect to enemies in that area. It also offers the Major Berserk synergy to allies for 10 seconds, increasing their damage by 10%. Alright, let's put theory into action. So the build did 46,000 points of damage per second, which is definitely stronger than the previous version of the build. Not as high as the 2-bar builds, but plenty to get through content. And the nice thing about heavy attack builds is they're really bursty. Trash goes down in a hurry. I can make an argument that this build is easier to run than my previous version because I don't have to pay attention to Haunting Curse. I have to pick and choose targets more because I'm using Bound Armaments, which is a single target skill. But with 67% of the damage coming from my heavy attacks, that's a small concern. I'd like to point out though that if you want to run Haunting Curse instead of Bound Armaments, you can get a slight bit more damage. But you'll have to watch that timer on Haunting Curse and not recast until it expires. Me, I like the simplicity of just using the bound daggers every other attack. This lets me pay attention to the fight instead of the timers at the bottom of my screen. Up in the pink numbers, you can see that off balance was up 35% of the time, which is slightly higher than the theoretical maximum, but that's possible in a short fight like this. Okay, let's move on.
Fishing is the closest I get to relaxing, and it always seems like I get better bites when sharing a fishing spot with someone else. So, if you ever want to cast some lines together, I can think of worse ways to spend our time.
Sounds good to me. But, should we help this guy? After we check the gear. Let's check the gear first. Unlike 2-bar builds, 1-bar heavy attack builds are entirely gear dependent. Without the right gear, they won't run at all. My weapon is the lightning staff of the sergeant. You'll have to grind Wayrest Sewers for this. Because this set comes in heavy, it has to go in the weapon and jewelry slots. The Sergeant's Mail set increases the damage of my heavy attacks. Because a lightning staff procs its damage multiple times during one heavy attack, this set's bonus damage gets applied multiple times. That's why no weapon other than the lightning staff will work here. I need the precise trait and a shock damage enchant on the staff. I have to put a shock glyph on this or it won't work, period. I need to apply the concuss status effect. That in turn will allow Wall of Elements to proc off balance. I mentioned this already, but I wanted to mention it again here. I'm also wearing one piece of the Slime Crawl monster set for extra crit. Conveniently, this comes from Wayrest Sewers too. My next set is Stormmaster, which comes from the Tempest Island dungeon. Now remember folks, you can farm this stuff from the normal version of these easy dungeons, except the monster helm. That only drops in veteran Wayrest Sewers. But if you have some Undaunted keys, you can just buy the shoulder. Stormmaster, like Sergeant's Mail, increases the damage of my heavy attacks. Also like Sergeant's Mail, it adds damage multiple times during one lightning staff heavy attack. I've seen numerous other sets run as the second set with these heavy attack builds, but none of them that I've run ever exceeded Stormmaster, which to me is still the best second set. Last but not least, I have the Oaken Soul Ring. This gives me more buffs than I want to mention here, but the most important one is Empower, which increases the damage of, you guessed it, heavy attacks. Oaken Soul isn't bad to farm as far as mythics go, which is good because I've got to have it for this build. By the way, this is what makes this a 1-bar build, because it doesn't allow me to swap bars while I'm wearing it. Okay, that's the gear. If you want to build a 1-bar heavy attack sorc, you've got to have these sets. You could run Deadly Strike instead of Stormmaster if you have that, but I wouldn't waste time with anything else. Body pieces here are medium with one heavy piece. Remember, Sergeant's Mail only comes in heavy, so you're stuck with one piece of heavy armor because the Oaken Soul Ring takes up a jewelry slot. Traits in the body pieces should all be divines. Lastly, my jewelry is Bloodthirsty with spell damage enchants. And it's time for the champion points. Blue slottables are Deadly Aim, Weapons Expert, Wrathful Strikes, and Fighting Finesse. Weapons Expert is the one you usually don't see except in heavy attack builds. And that about wraps things up. I've got to be honest, when we talked about fishing, I was picturing a warmer place. Well, I hope you enjoyed the video and found something you can use. I'll continue to sprinkle in more of these 1-bar builds here and there because they fit in with my goals that I started the channel with. I want a channel for average players made by an average player. Using myself as an example, I want to show how the game can be tackled without perfect rotations, best in slot gear, or an excessive amount of time attaining those things. I think a lot of players in the game can appreciate this more relaxed and simplified approach. Well, thanks for watching the video. I'm Centurion and you've been watching ESO Vault. If you want more Elder Scrolls content like this, be sure to like the video and subscribe. Have a great day and enjoy your adventures in Tamriel. Let's get out of here. I'm freezing my ass off.
on.